Hello, everyone. My name is Paul Labiner. I'm delighted to be one of the presenters at this Prime event and one of the sponsors. I do hope that you're taking the opportunity of visiting some of the other booths and some of the other presentations. We have a plethora of information that is dedicated to us 50 plus year olds. So enjoy it and take advantage of it. My presentation today is there's more to planning than simply a will and avoiding probate. Here in South Florida, there are many presentations in terms of how to avoid probate and some other estate planning techniques. I'm not going to bore you to tears as it relates to any of those issues. I uh, promise you a couple things today. I promise you to try to give you some insight into some of the issues that I think we all need to be sensitized to, which is why I call the presentation an introduction to preserving wealth in today's ever-changing economic, financial, and health-related landscape that we've all been experiencing during the course of this past year. It's a difficult time. It's a new normal, as I like to say. I'm not sure that life as we once knew it is going to be exactly the same as it has been in the past. But today's presentation is again going to be a little bit different. It's not going to be your typical estate planning presentation, and I'm going to promise you a couple things. Number one, that it's not going to be your typical estate planning presentation. Number two, that although there are some political issues that we need to discuss, particularly in this election year, uh, this is a nonpartisan presentation. So this is by no means being representative of any political party. And lastly, and perhaps most importantly, is that I promise you not to bore you today. But let's get into the presentation and some of the issues that I really want to discuss because we are in this ever-changing life events that we've never experienced before. We're in a political environment today that is unprecedented. We've had a year of health considerations that have affected us either personally, economically, or socially. We have some social and political discord that is making life much more difficult for us. And people are losing their jobs. People are going hungry. It's been unsettling to me personally to see during my lifetime people actually waiting online for food. I've never thought in my wildest dreams that here in the United States we'd be experiencing those, but we have some difficult times. People are losing their jobs, people are losing their health insurance. And as a result, we have done many different things to try to enhance our economy. The federal government has done its best to try to provide additional economic benefits to both businesses and individuals to the tune of almost $3 trillion as of August, in terms of the date of this presentation. There's talk of additional monies being allocated to both businesses and individuals to help us get through these difficult times. But these difficult times affect many of us and affect many of us in many different ways. And I'd like to discuss that because my view of this engagement is not simply one of creating estate planning documents. You can do that relatively easily without the necessity of coming to the office of Paul Labiner. Let me explain to you a little bit about how I like to view an engagement of what I consider wealth transfer planning. This is not an estate plan. This is not a tax plan. This is not a financial plan. This is what I really truly consider as a wealth transfer plan. And let's just backtrack just a little bit. Most people spend most of their time, many of my clients, accumulating wealth, trying to develop a cohesive investment portfolio, try to work hard to make money, try to save money. That's the typical goal for many of us. However, I maintain that if you spend just a little bit of time at the preservation stage, you will have more of a resounding impact on your financial resources for yourself and your loved ones than just simply the accumulation phase. And how do we do that? Well, as I said, this is my terminology is not estate planning, but wealth transfer planning. Why wealth transfer planning? Because we look at this engagement in a much more holistic approach. We look at things not in a vacuum, but we look at the totality of the family circumstances. We look at trying to preserve wealth for our family. We look at ways of trying to protect wealth from our family. We look at ways of mitigating taxes, whether that's estate taxes or income taxes. And we look at asset protection. Asset protection has become a very, very serious component to this type of engagement for lots of reasons. For example, a week does not go by in my office where someone doesn't say to me, either directly or indirectly, Paul, I don't care what you need to do, but under no uncertain terms do I want that son of a gun daughter in law of mine or that son of a gun son in law of mine to get my assets. Well, that's a common theme. It's a very common theme and in many respects a legitimate to ensure that your wealth that you've accumulated during your wealth time continues to fall down your lineal descendants. Creditors is becoming more of a concern. As we said a little bit earlier, it has been a whirlwind of a year. People have lost jobs. People have lost their ability to pay rent, to pay their credit cards, uh, to pay their mortgages. I'm not sure we've seen the end of these issues. So for yourself and your loved ones, creditors may become an issue, and protecting or creating a fortress around your estate becomes a very important consideration in this type of engagement. So again, my view of the world is a little bit differently than many other attorneys. And let me expound upon that as we go on in my presentation today. I promised you that this was not going to be a typical boring estate planning program. However, I would be remiss if I did not spend just a minute or two discussing some of the core estate planning documents. That being a will, a revocable trust, power of attorney, living will, and healthcare surrogate. Those are your basic core estate planning documents. And by the way, you do not have to come to the law office of Paul Labiner to get these documents. You can go on the internet. It is becoming more prevalent to be able to create these documents on the internet. And it's much less expensive. It may be even easier because you can be clicking on a computer screen. However, you're losing some of the basic components of getting the insight, of getting the experience, and getting the understanding of what these documents represent. Let me just spend a couple minutes telling you a little bit about some of these issues that you need to be sensitized to. A revocable trust. We spend we spend a lot of effort in terms of trying to create a mechanism that at the time of our death, that we will avoid probate. Probate has a negative connotation. And there's lots of ways to avoid probate. It's not just through a revocable trust. And as I said earlier, you can go to the internet and you can draft a document and have a revocable trust and say to all your friends, look, I have a revocable trust. I went on the internet. It cost me X amount of dollars. The key component to a revocable trust is not necessarily the legal documentation itself. The key component to the revocable trust is making sure that your assets are titled in the name of the revocable trust. So yes, you can have a revocable trust, but if your house, if your marketable securities, if your CDs, if your money market accounts, and every other asset that you have is not titled in the name of the John Smith Revocable Trust, it has not accomplished your underlying objective of avoiding probate, because the will direct a probate as it relates to those assets. Yes, will it get directed? Will your assets ultimately get transferred pursuant to your terms of the revocable trust? Absolutely. But there needs to be coordination of these documentations. There needs to be a fluid transfer. And yes, there are other attorneys even in the South Florida area, that are advertising revocable trusts at very, very, very inexpensive rates. But that's not the full job. If you were to come to the office of Paul Labiner, I'm going to ensure that there is continuity amongst all the documents. Yes, I'm going to draft a revocable trust, but I'm going to take the next step and the crucial step of making sure that those assets are properly transferred. Powers of attorney, living wills, healthcare records, very important documentation. We want to make sure that in the event of the unfortunate circumstances of our poor health uh, or our inability to manage assets, that we have properly designated an individual to be able to assist us in that process of addressing our financial assets, and more importantly, especially in today's day and age, our healthcare considerations. So those documents are becoming extremely important. And in fact, even with the healthcare surrogate, in light of COVID this past year, many people have begun to start reevaluating how they want to address their medical care. And the healthcare surrogate is there to ensure that your wishes are addressed, not necessarily the wishes of your medical providers. So family circumstances change. And a core component to this documentation is the subjective data. Uh, Subjective data being your family, your finances, your set of circumstances. Let's go through that for if we can. These are some of the issues that have transpired during the course of this past year that many people have expressed to me that they're concerned about. Well, taxes. Taxes are the lowest they've been in many, many years. Will that continue? In my personal opinion, probably not. And we'll get a little bit more into that, and I'll tell you why. Reduction in entitlements. When was the last time you went online to see what your benefits are for Social Security? We're in this ever-changing financial landscape. We've spent trillions of dollars trying to boost up the economy. It's very easy for the mint to print money. It's very easy, thankfully, to the Chinese and other governments that actually purchase our government securities. So we're in this favorable financial situation. But at some point in time, folks, we're going to have to pay these trillions of dollars in debt back. And it's going to behoove us, for ourselves, for our children, for our grandchildren, to make sure that we take this more holistic approach to be able to ensure that we're maximizing our assets. Other issues that come into play that people have been concerned about, that have been expressed in my office, is obviously, having a financial secure retirement. And has the political environment, we are in a very difficult political stage. We're soon to elect a new president. That new president or that new administration will affect each and every one of us, probably in our pocketbooks. And I'll go into that in a little bit more detail. And has your financial situation changed for yourself, for your children? Have they lost their job? Do they have to stay at home now with their children because they have to be homeschooled? There's just lots of things that have taken place that need to be addressed. Just to backtrack a little bit, let me tell you, and this is really where the key component of this process is. It's not the legal documentation. As I said, you can go online and get that legal documentation. It's the subjective information. It's the key to your family unit that makes this plan work efficiently. To give you an example, my family, like all of our families, is not perfect. My beautiful wife, Mindy, is not my first wife. It's not my second wife. She is my third wife. And she'll probably kill me if she ever sees this presentation that I even discussed this on air. But be that as it may, I love Mindy to death. We've been married for many years. and we have no children together. She has two children from her previous marriage, and I have my two children. So our plans don't necessarily coordinate with one another. We have different goals, we have different objectives. My situation is a little bit more complicated. My son Brandon, who's 32, who's an attorney and works in my office, brilliant, loving child. But at age 6, he was diagnosed with juvenile diabetes. It was the worst day in my life. Um, and I need to be sensitized to that. I need to plan for that. My daughter, who I love dearly, who's a nurse practitioner. So I have great kids. I'm blessed. Doesn't know the difference between a stock, bond, CD, or any other financial instrument. So I need to be aware of that. I need to coordinate that into my planning consideration. I don't think she'll ever really embrace the idea of the finance world. So for all of us, and I hate to say it, there's an element of fear that permeates our inner soul. That fear of our own personal health or the health of our loved ones, the fear of our finances, whether it's the volatility of the marketplace, uh, the future of where our market will be and whether our finances will be, the tax implications of what's going to take place. It's an ever changing world. What you did 2 years ago, in my personal opinion, probably needs to be reevaluated. We're afraid, particularly for our age group, about our mental, capabilities. As we age, we have issues that we need to be sensitized to. Uh, will we have the same mental capabilities as we did when we were younger? Will we have the same physical capabilities as we did when we were younger? Is our housing situation as comfortable in the future as it will be today? There's a plethora of different considerations. And I don't want to bore you with all of them. I think I've outlined some of them. I've expressed some of them as well. The key is you need to think about it. You need to evaluate it because we all have our little nuance. I have been doing this for 40 plus years, and there is never, and that's a pretty powerful word. And I'm not sure never is the road. I have rarely seen a situation where somebody has a particular nuance that needs to be factored in. Why is that? Well, what are we talking about? Talking about money. Money has some very positive attributes, but money also has some negative attributes that we need to be aware of and sensitized to. So how will the current political environment impact, some of our planning? And you'll look at this slide and you'll say, Paul, we have a current gift and estate tax exemption of $11,580,000. What do I have to worry about? Well, the truth of the matter is you don't have to worry about that more often than not. If you have an estate, a husband and wife that has an estate of about $23 million or less, excuse me, you don't have much to worry about today. What about tomorrow? Because that is likely going to change. In fact, the current law states that $11,580,000 exemption that you have today, regardless of where we are politically, the current law states that law sunsets or reverts back to the old rules beginning January 1st, 2026. So that's going to change. My opinion is it's going to probably change prior to that. It'll probably change prior to that because it has to. We just need avenues to develop additional revenues to pay for this extenuating circumstances that we've just experienced this past year. So if you look at the tax proposals of the Democrats, they're looking to reduce that $11,580,000 to $3.5 million or maybe $5 million. It's a moving target, and will continue to be a moving target. I think one of the things that we need to realize and understand is the fact that the world changes. The world this year is upside down. I don't have the crystal ball. I can't tell you where we're going to be, but you need to develop a plan that can ebb and flow with these changes in the world, that can make adjustments. But you need to give it the thought and consideration to be able to accomplish that and have some guidance along the way. And frankly, that's where I come into play. So even at the $3.5 million or $5 million estate tax threshold, you still have to have a pretty significant estate to even be concerned about estate taxes. Agreed. Estate taxes is really not the issue that it was when we had a $600,000 exemption or $1 million exemption years ago. However, there is a very important proposal that is pending that may impact each and every one of us. We already discussed that estate taxes may not be an issue. But if this proposal, which is being presented, comes to pass, whether now or in the future, there is going to be a much larger threshold of individuals that are going to be subject to taxes. What this particular provision states, and not to get into great detail, is really quite simple. Basically, the step up in basis simply says that if you bought an asset, piece of real estate, stock, for $100 that you did not sell during your lifetime, and at the time of your death, it's worth $1,000. So that $900 gain got stepped up at the time of death because under current law, when your loved one receives that $1,000, they can then sell that piece of real estate. They can sell that stock and they have zero tax implications. The new proposals, the new issues, which will have a resounding effect on all of us, is to eliminate that step up in basis. So when your loved one receives that stock or piece of real estate that had that built-in gain, in my example of $900, they will now pay taxes on that. So I don't care what you call it. You can call it an estate tax, you can call it a gift tax, you can call it an income tax, you can call it a capital gains tax. At the bottom line, it's a tax. We have different labels for it, but it affects every one of us. And it behooves us to look at these changes, at these issues. Because if this does come to pass, it will have an impact on many of us. So, Paul, you've talked in kind of general terms. You've talked about the difficulty that we face. You've talked about some of the personal issues that we need to be sensitized to. Excuse me. So, what do I do? You know, well, you could do a lot of things. Number one, you don't have to do anything. This is not an engagement that most people enjoy, quite frankly. It's not the type of thing you're at the tennis court, you're on the bocce court, you're playing golf. Oh, I did my will today. I did my estate plan today. I did my wealth transfer planning today. Wow, I'm on top of the earth. Well, in my opinion, you should be. Because when you have that fortress created around your family assets, that will give you the peace of mind that each and every one of us are looking for. That eradicates some of the fears that we talked about. That eradicates some of the concerns that we have either for ourselves or our loved ones. Look at this in a much more holistic approach, as I do. And I think you'll feel better about the fact that you have a proper plan in place. So we have this $11,580,000 exemption that I made reference to. If you're blessed with a larger estate, it's a very simple process. Use it or lose it. Take advantage of it. If you have a smaller estate, the same principle applies. Take advantage of this current set of circumstances because I don't know what the future is going to bring. I have some pretty strong feelings and ideas in mind in terms of the direction that we're likely to go. And in my personal opinion, I truly believe that it's going to probably uh, we're going to probably experience greater taxation uh, through a plethora of different proposals. So why not take advantage of these opportunities now? Create that fortress around your estate, and it can be done. It can be done based upon your subjective needs and considerations. I don't care whether you have an estate that's worth $100,000 or $100 million. It's your money. It's your family. Plan for it. Let me just spend just a moment or two being a little bit more specific, um, because again, I promised you early on that I wasn't going to bore you with a lot of the legal stuff. But again, I feel compelled to at least discuss some planning ideas that you may want to consider, that you probably haven't heard about, that may resonate and may have some impact in terms of your thinking and your planning. Regardless of what you do, please review, plan, and revise. Take the time, whether it's me or another advisor, to reevaluate your planning, because now is a wonderful opportunity. It's a golden opportunity to take advantage of the current laws, the current set of circumstances. We had this experience this past year that was unsettling for all of us. Let's take some time to kind of map out a financial blueprint, a financial strategy that makes sense. One concept that I just wanted to briefly share with you is called the Spousal Lifetime Access Trust, excuse me, or what we commonly refer to as the SLAT. Now, we have all of these beautiful acronyms: SLATs, CRUTs, CRATs. They're just acronyms for different techniques that we incorporate. I believe that in this current environment, and with the current planning techniques that we have in place, that you could basically have your cake and eat it too. The SLAT is a perfect example of that, because the SLAT takes advantage of the current tax law, takes advantage of the ability to take your assets and protect them from creditors, predators, divorce, and malpractice actions, and the plethora of other issues that may befall us. Creates this wonderful financial blueprint for our, excuse me, for ourselves and our loved ones, but at the same time ensures that you don't lose control of that asset, at least not directly. This works well in a husband and wife situation. This is designed for a husband and wife, because the husband or the wife transfer the assets into this trust primarily for the benefit of the other spouse. So the other spouse is the beneficiary of that trust. So the family unit in totality does not lose the ability to use and have access to those monies. Again, as I mentioned earlier, it's outside the tax system. No income taxes, no estate taxes, no gift taxes, and preserves and protects that wealth for the benefit of yourselves and your loved ones. There are some other techniques. One that I use frequently for many of my clients, because they're not concerned about taxes. They're not concerned about income taxes or estate taxes, but they're concerned about the preservation of their wealth. They're concerned about, asset protection, whether it's a divorce, creditors, or any other unfortunate set of circumstances that may come into play. So if that's the catalyst, then so be it. And suffice it to say that we have numerous techniques to be able to address that specific issue. It's not that complicated, and it's not that expensive. You're not going to be able to do this on the internet. You're not going to be able to do this simply by seeking the services of another attorney that's advertising, a simple document for a very inexpensive price. Um, Frankly, you're going to have to see an individual like myself or another competent attorney to be able to effectively create this financial blueprint. That's the goal. I look at this engagement like a puzzle. I have a client in front of me that has a plethora of different issues and concerns. It's my job to put the puzzle together. It's my job to ensure that your issues, your concerns are addressed. I'd be delighted to meet with you personally. There is no cost for this consultation, whether it's by phone, whether it's personally, whether it's by video conference. Um, take the time, take advantage of the opportunity to sit down with me. And I would be delighted at no cost, no obligation, no pressure to begin to start addressing some of the issues that we've discussed today. Folks, it's been a pleasure. Enjoy the rest of the show. I know it's a little bit different than we've been experiencing in the past. I wish we were there live to shake hands and to be live in this presentation. But again, we're in a new normal and we're adjusting accordingly. Thank you for joining me.